Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Deanne De Vries. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here this evening. Welcome. I'm excited to have you talk about a subject we've not really touched on. You wrote a wonderful book called Africa, Open for Business. And I know nothing about that continent or the business opportunities and how we can converge together and find wonderful opportunities. But you've worked on the continent for many years, and you've written a book sharing just that. But before we go to share that, just fill the audience in a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so ever since I was a little kid and I heard that sometimes it was challenging for children to go to school in Africa and that they didn't have libraries, I was dumbfounded because I grew up every Saturday going to the library. So as a 6-year-old girl, I told my mom, I'm going to move to Africa one day so I can teach kids to read and write. And then, of course, you promptly forget it because you dream about so many things as a little girl. And then 18 years later, I had an opportunity to go to Africa as a volunteer. And my mom reminded me, she goes, when you were 6 years old.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and it just really got into my blood, as they like to say. And yeah, so I've basically spent the last 30 years traversing across the continent.
And you know, what's amazing to me is I find a lot of people's deep passions or what they're here to do are actually instilled in us from very early on. But we sometimes just, as you say, put it aside because we have so many different excitements and passions as a kid that we end up coming back to it, hopefully earlier than later. And I'm glad you were able to, fill your passion and go there. Now, I'm thinking with Africa being so large and such a great continent, most people sometimes don't realize it's actual continent with many different countries. And I'm thinking many different cultures within that country's continent.
Yeah, exactly. A book that I always have on my desk is a children's book, and it's called Africa's Not a Country. And it's great because people pick it up and like, oh, it's not? It's like, no, it's actually 54 countries and multiple cultures, over 2,100 languages. They say up to 3,500 different ethnic groups. And so, yeah, it's a huge diversity, but that also brings with it the positive side that they grow up in a multicultural environment. And so to them, it's completely normal. And so they're very quick to adapt to different working styles, different traditions, different company cultures as well.
Yeah. Was it really hard for you to learn any of the languages or also mingle with the cultures being you're from the United States?
So they have a wide variety of languages. I first moved to Kenya, and Swahili is one of the easiest. And what I learned is every country I would go to, you just learned how to say 3 or 4 things. Like in Senegal, I literally know 4 words, and that means, how are you? Nagadaf. I'm fine, magnifique. That's all I know. But if I meet a Senegalese and say them, that's in Wolof, which is their largest spoken tribal language. Oh my gosh, it just melts the ice. And so I speak fluent Swahili and then French and Portuguese as well. Afrikaans is similar to Dutch, so I can do that. And the rest of them, there's probably another 10, 15 languages that I literally just speak what I call breaking the ice. Yeah, because their language also helps you get to know the culture.
Yeah, I can imagine, because even when I've gone to Europe, the languages that you learn in different countries are a part of the culture. They're not separate. And I remember going to see my family members in Germany, and we have a lot of, here in the US, a lot of slang, which I didn't even realize that we use all the time without realizing it until I'm hanging with my cousins, and they're like, what the heck are you saying? Because they learn proper English, usually British English, and they were like, what are you talking about? So actually, just as you said, I find that also people like when you come to their country and you make an intention to try to speak their language, and it's just like, thank you, you really care, and you're trying to speak our language and communicate.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows that you're there for more than just yourself, because I always tell people the number one success factor for doing business in Africa is just going there, getting on a plane and going there and sitting in the local cafe and watching the world go by and just having that curiosity and asking, so what do you do? Why do you do that? So teach me, how come you do not a that's wrong, but just a, hey, teach me. And when you do that, you learn so much, and it makes life a lot funner because you learn different ways of doing things.
Exactly. And different ways of thinking about things and seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I wanted to travel the world, so that has to be on my next bucket list to go to the continent of Africa. Where would you
Yes.
suggest anyone start with? Is there any specific place that's a good place to go for a newbie that someone who's never been there?
So it really depends on what you're interested in and what you're comfortable with.
Mm,
So when I worked for a company out of the Middle East, they were very comfortable in North Africa because they share the common language of Arabic and the same religion as Muslim. Some people coming from an English speaking background, they're like, oh, I'll go to South Africa or I'll go to Kenya because they speak English. And so then that's like, okay, I feel at home. I can communicate with people. I'm not as nervous.
Well, I kind of like getting out there and being very movement oriented, and
Hmm.
I've thought of wanting to do maybe a safari.
Hmm.
Would Kenya be the best place to start if you wanted to go and do that, or?
Say if I said Kenya was the best place, then everybody else would be mad at me. The cool
Oh no,
thing,
okay.
the cool thing is there's so much that you can do, and
Wow.
because it's such a large continent, you can literally, I mean, you can go on a business trip and tag on a safari at the end,
Nice.
because literally every country has something special to offer. It's kind of like if you're in the United States and
Mhm.
you know there's different things that you're going to see in the South versus the West versus if you're in
Mm,
Colorado, California, or Boston, for example.
absolutely. So, say someone's listening in, they're going, I've never considered doing business with the continent of Africa. Where
Yeah.
do they begin to look at like what businesses are best suited to the continent? Because a lot of the people that are actually listening in or business owners that have come on Savvy are service-based entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
They might be doctors, they might be psychologists, they also might be coaches, that type of thing. What's
Hmm.
your take? Mm,
So Africa has right now about 17% of the world's population, and
mm,
it's one of the few continents that's actually growing.
mm,
So 60% of their population is under the age of 24.
wow.
So, what are people looking for? Whether you've got a service or a product, you're looking for customers, you're looking for loyalty. And
Mm,
so, Africa today has 17%. By 2050, it'll have 26% of the world's population. Right. And then, if you've got 60% of that population that's under the age of 24, imagine all the years they have to buy your service or
mm,
your product.
mhm,
And really what it requires is again what I call it the ABCs: appetite, bandwidth, capital. What's your appetite? Do you
mhm,
just want to like take a few snacks, a few appetizers, or are you like, no, I want a full service buffet and I'm going in for the whole thing?
mhm.
And do you want to do it now? And then because really they need everything that you and I need. So think about it. We got up today, brushed our teeth, put on shoes, hopped in a car, maybe went to the playground after work with the kids, watched a movie at night. They do all those same things. So they need everything. They use everything that you and I use.
Mhm.
So there's really not an industry that you would say is not Africa
Needed.
is not open for. Yeah, or is not needed. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what is some of the myths that maybe people in the United States might have about the continent of Africa, and what should
Mhm.
they pay attention to when they go to visit so they don't make faux pas or whatever?
That's a great question because I talk about, some people think that things are risks and they're actually not. So people will be like, oh, nobody speaks English. Well, actually, they all do. Most Africans speak at least three languages. So, yeah, they can handle English. Sometimes they're like, oh, but they're not trained, they're not skilled. And I always laugh because I'm like, yeah, I didn't know PowerPoint or Excel when I started working all those years ago, and a floppy
Mhm.
disk was really floppy.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to learn on the job, and so believe me, if they can speak the languages, they can learn how to do Excel or PowerPoint. Another misconception is that Africa is risky,
Hmm.
and it's not. It's not as risky as people perceive it to be. I mean, if you go from, for example, I'm from California, if you go across the state line to Nevada, or if you go to New York, that's also a bit of a different culture,
Mhm.
a different climate as well. So anytime you go into a new country, it's going to be risky. And really the number one thing people need to do is get on the ground. So what I do is I work with companies and I find out, okay, what are you comfortable with? And what is your product? Do you have any ideas where you want to go? Do you have any ideas where your customers may already be? And then I work with them to help them understand, okay, here's the top 3 countries, for example, that, or the top 3 cities maybe that you'd want to look to launching your product or your service in. And then once that's done, we can talk about how you're going to enter the market.
That's great. I like that you mentioned that people have concerns that are unfounded, like language and understanding you and being able to communicate, because even when I've traveled to Europe, the understanding is, oh, they don't speak English. But almost everywhere I went in Greece, I was surprised that all the signs were in English. I was like, isn't this Greece? Why are they in English? But because most of the world does speak English, and we're one of the few countries that don't learn at least another language as other than our own. Most, because most Americans don't know other than English for the most part, or maybe one other language. But in Europe and other places, they know several languages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and once you get on the ground, then it takes away that that fear factor. Because then you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, I can order a hamburger, or I can communicate with people in English. Or one of my favorite things to do, and I do this with customers, is I'll take them to the local grocery store. And it's so much fun. I mean, there's a lot of things. You can get microwave popcorn. You can get different kinds of beer, for example, or Coca-Cola, or, whatever you want. And then they start like, oh, actually, okay, this isn't as different as I thought.
Yeah, I think sometimes we think our cultures are so different. What I've found traveling, and I haven't traveled too many countries, but I find that on the whole, humans are not that different wherever they come from. They might have a different way of looking at the world, but the core of it, of you love your kids, you love your family, you want to be as prosperous as you can, doesn't really change from country to country or person to person.
Exactly. Yeah, we have more in common actually than we have different.
Yeah, no, this is great. Anyone listening in, if they want to find out how they can work with Africa, or get a copy of your book, or even work with you, because you said you've directed certain businesses on how to get started, how can they do that?
So my book is on Amazon, Africa Open for Business, and my website is drdeannedevries.com.
Awesome.
And you can find my contact details, and please reach out. I'd love to help.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much, Deanne. Deanne, it was great meeting you, and you shared such wonderful information today. I hope it broadens everyone's views of looking at Africa, the continent, and considering it for future business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. This has been fun.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.